What's up, everybody? Welcome to Podcast Now, Back to the Past. I'm Alex, and in this video, I want to take a look back at Disney's Epic Mickey Rebrushed. Now, this is also, going to touch upon Disney's Epic Mickey just in general, but obviously, original game releasing back in 2010, which would be the 15th anniversary, as we go into 2025. Obviously, Rebrushed just came out, right, this past September, and I think for what it is and for what it does, a great remake. We're going to talk about a lot of the features of this game, and I think the easy thing to do would be to kind of talk about the remake. It's what I just played. I did actually play the original, and leading into this, I knew, the remake was coming. I actually bought the original game physically on the Wii. I remember playing it back in the day and having fun with it. Now, you got to think, 2010 and just a younger version of myself, I think less critical, back in the day. Look, the original did have some issues, and I do want to kind of go deeper than that in this video, because I think the game is actually kind of frustrating at times. Not frustrating because of the camera work. In fact, the camera work has been redone, right? And it's so much better. This is the best, I think, version that you can make of the game, okay? The camera enhancements, the visuals, just the kind of ironing out the edges of the first game. But the thing that the remake doesn't do, and I never really expected it to, is to really, I think, grab hold of that potential that Epic Mickey's just never really been able to do. It's got an amazing premise. I love the meta commentary of, the forgotten things, right? And going through this kind of journey of like Disney's backlog, and the paint mechanic, which I think is extremely cool, and they don't capture the full thing. So those are all things that I want to talk about in this video. As always, if you like this stuff, leave a like. Let me know what you guys think of Epic Mickey in the comments, and let's jump into it. So some of the more behind the scenes stuff, I'm not like a huge master of Disney, behind the scenes knowledge and stuff. Oswald, like, I'm familiar. I didn't know, back in 2006, I believe they reacquired the rights, and this was the first the first property where Mickey and Oswald were actually together in something, and it's cool. I mean, they're really fun characters, and I guess also for Mickey in particular, this was part of a rebrand of making him more mischievous. Now, I gotta say this, okay? Like, growing up, you'll see Mickey here and there, right? My main thing with Mickey, no lie, is Kingdom Hearts, and I don't know how many people can relate to that. I feel like in the gaming sphere, maybe more people than I think can relate. And Mickey kind of is this like noble king. He's literally King Mickey in Kingdom Hearts. So I've always seen him in a certain light, but I have always, I think, recognized that mischievous side, whether it's animation or whatever. So those kind of this is the first time. This is the first time this happened, first time that happened, or part of a rebranding and stuff, right? It never really that never got me. That never really caught on. But I will say, being an adult and knowing that while also playing the game, you can see it, right? Like Mickey's kind of wild, in this game. And they go, some dark paths, like I guess how the entire game starts in general, of him just really royally messing up, let's say, right, with Yen Sid. And you got like Donald and Goofy, and they're animatronics. They're just heads, you gotta find the rest of their bodies. Like, I was shocked, and I had to kind of remember, certain parts of this game. But the game is a little bit darker and is a little bit more on the wild side, and I definitely can appreciate it. And again, in terms of the meta commentary of like, hey, let's look at things that are forgotten. Let's not be afraid to go back, in Disney's back catalog with characters or locations or just things that are kind of B and C tier, right? And then when you get to like A tier with Mickey, he's just a little bit different. When you get to the familiar faces in Donald and Goofy, they're heads. They don't even have bodies. So the game, I think, is just a spin on what you would kind of imagine, think Disney Epic Mickey. I mean, Mickey is definitely, I would say, epic in this game. Okay, now we jump into now, and again, I think the remake does exactly what it needs to do. I don't know about the price. In fact, the reason why it took me so long for this is I wanted it. I knew it, right? I wrote it down. I knew I needed to get this game. But $60 for a remake on a game that's, at times it's very middling during a busy fall period, for gaming. It was something I waited on, and I think I actually got it for $30. I think I got a half off from Target or something, as we got into Black Friday. I think that's a much better price, and I think the remake does, again, exactly what it needs to do. It enhances it. Back in 2010, I wasn't thinking too much about camera angles and frustrations there. In fact, it's kind of a thing, an era where you just get used to it. Having this channel where we go back and we look at a lot of these games from that 2010, the mid-2000s even, you kind of just get used to like certain things flat out not working. I grew up on Kingdom Hearts 1 where the camera angle always fights you, right? Just consistently. So, those are definitely improvements and definitely things that the remake fixes. And again, like I said, it is the best version. I mean, I think this game looks beautiful, and there was always, I think, a strength of this game is the visual style. And so let's break this game down a little bit. Let's talk about the strengths. Let's talk about the weaknesses. In my opinion, there's kind of two major strengths to this game, maybe three if I kind of expand my thinking, one of which is easily the side-scroller stuff, right? I think that was heavily praised back in the day. You can clearly tell now, too, that is just a standout thing. Now, I'm a big side-scroller guy. I love them. There's a lot of them that come out every single year, but, they all bring something kind of new to the table. It is simplistic, and the entire game is kind of simplistic. In fact, it reminds me of Spyro in a way, where it's kind of the ultimate collectathon game. Now, I think this game is trying to be more than that, okay? And I think it actually accomplishes it, but at its core, you go into areas and you collect things, right? And the side-scroller parts to kind of just stick there, I think their main strength is diversity, okay? Just in the backdrops and what's going on in the background. None of it's hard, okay? And, someone like me, I mean, I shouldn't struggle, with Epic Mickey side-scrolling levels, right? Or really just Epic Mickey in general. But it is a lot of fun. It's really rock solid, I think, mechanics. It's very, very simple, in terms of double jumping, in terms of sliding and chaining that into something you learned from Crash Bandicoot back in the day, right, growing up. But it's a staple, right? So being able to chain those things together, being able to use your spin to give yourself just that extra kind of edge, and, going around, finding the film reels, just collecting the e-tickets because you're going to need them eventually. And again, I think that diversity is really the biggest thing. There are some really, really cool side-scrolling parts to this game, and they're plentiful. I mean, the entire game, I would actually say maybe that's a little bit more of a negative because I think the game gets too repetitive and kind of actually overstays its welcome because of it. But, I always enjoy, okay, when I'm going to go from one area to the next, you got to go through a side-scrolling level to get to the next area. I always look forward to it, okay? I always kind of say, oh my God, I can't wait to see, what the next area is. So I think I really have nothing negative. I mean, it is simplistic for sure, but I think the visual design and just everything kind of being a little bit different, going through like whether it's Ghosts or like the Steamboat kind of era, all that stuff, so freaking good, okay? Then when it comes to the basic levels, I guess, yeah, I can probably expand. Like, it's probably more than two good things about this game. The bosses, I actually think are really, really cool. Not a fan of how they move, and I do remember this when the angle changes and the reticle that you're using for your paintbrush changes, and it's much more annoying. Now, I do think they fixed it more now because I do remember that. If one thing I do remember frustratingly about this game is that. So I'm not a huge fan of that, but I do think overall bosses in this game are awesome. Like Captain Hook freaking rocks. I mean, all the bosses, Pete, really, really cool, just really different. And, you have to stay in the mold of like this kind of platformy type game, and so you can't do anything too outrageous. You have to have Mickey, whether it's dissolving things or adding things with paint or spin attacks, right? Like, you have to kind of stay in that mold. But I think they do a really good job of the diversity, even with the bosses, but also the locations. And I would say the one other kind of part to this I think is the game's biggest strength is the choices. Now, I actually saw when looking up this game, like, people criticize just, I guess, like, player decision making in the game. I don't actually, or I guess back in the day, I don't really get that because I actually, to be honest with you, I kind of think it's one of the game's strengths. So what am I talking about? Okay, in all of these levels, right, you walk into a level and you're presented with a couple different tasks. You don't have to do everything, right? They throw a couple side quests at you. You have to do the main quest, and how you do it, there is like kind of a blunt force way that you can just like go straight forward, or you can kind of go off the beaten path. You can free some like captive slaves basically, and they will kind of bypass things. And I actually think that's one of the coolest parts of the game, and that is where I would say let's bring back the Spyro kind of comparison I made earlier. That's where I think this game does stand out because, it is a platformer, it is a collectathon, but ultimately how you handle things tends to be different depending on what you want to do. And I think that's a really big strength because you could just, okay, you want to turn a bunch of valves, you can do that. And look, you're going to be going around each level finding things naturally. That's what the game wants you to do. But while you're doing it, you might run into those valves and have no problem just doing, again, just like blunt forcing the basic task of the level. But then, harder to reach areas and harder to reach even items that you might find in each location. Sometimes you have a choice to make with an item. I can do one thing with it or another, and that might lead to basically actually rejecting a quest or failing a quest, but you would accept and succeed at another one. So those kind of little moments I actually really like. I think, now this is where it goes into the negative, I think it just overstays its welcome. There's definitely diversity and, the different lands, the different, environments just in general, but the structure is the exact same no matter what. And when you do it, and I mean, almost the diversity gets in the way, which you normally wouldn't say, and, or would say, oh my God, a game that's got, I don't even know how many levels this game has, but it's got so many, right? Dozens and dozens. And you say, okay, I can appreciate the different enemies. I can appreciate the different locations. They're all super cool to look at. Again, visually, the game is always a treat. But when you walk in, you know what you're doing, right? You know that, okay, it's going to be a problem. I'm going to have to do like one or two things, and I'm going to collect as much stuff as I can. And in those one or two things, I can maybe kind of take a detour also once or twice, right? And you rinse and repeat, and you do it for hours and hours and hours. And I think that's where the game kind of, and that's not something I expect them to fix in the remake. I mean, I know we've had things like the Dead Spaces of the world and Silent Hills. When you have these elite remakes, I think you've got to start from a place also of eliteness. And I don't even know if actually that's a word, but I say that with all due respect. Like the thing with Epic Mickey, and I'm fine with it. When you're remaking somewhat classics, but like classics that are rough around the edges, this is what you get. You don't get a perfect game because the original was not perfect, right? You know what I mean? Like that's when you do Silent Hill 2, you're remaking a masterpiece. You actually have to be very careful with it because you're going to scare people that you're even touching in the first place. Epic Mickey has a ton of problems. It is a really good like textbook definition of like a 7 out of 10 game, right? Like it does a couple things really well, and then it's kind of mediocre in a lot of ways. And so when you remake it, unless you're going to like completely overhaul the game, which I guess you could, but I don't even know if that's a remake at that point, then you have to do that in order to really enhance it. So those are all things, I guess to just keep in mind. I'm not blaming, Purple Lamp that did it. I think they're insanely talented. One of my favorite, of these remake type studios, and very, very good just overall. There's only so much you can do. But that is, that potential that's right there that I don't think they ever grabbed. And then in my opinion, they actually went backwards. This was the best game. Epic Mickey was better, I think, in so many ways than Epic Mickey 2. And so this was like the closest they got to that high potential, and they never really grabbed it. And this was one of the main reasons why. Now, the only other part to talk about, and the other thing that's good but not great, not elite, right, is the paint. And this is where I kind of want to end the video off on. So this is a beautiful idea. Okay, beautiful. I mean, thematically, just visually, like in any way, in any theme you want to talk about, the paint is so freaking cool. And there is choice there too, right? Like how you handle bosses. You can paint or you can unpaint, basically. You can thin, and you could do that with pumps around the environment, and that will change things. And which you use more is going to basically upgrade those, where you'll have more paint capacity, right, for them. So that's all there, and I think that's all good. And I think the game does get actually rather clever with like basic platforming stuff, where it's like, okay, you're gonna need to paint this, or I think later on there's I remember because I was playing it last night even, there's fire. There's fire on like a drawbridge, and you have to erase it, and the fire will go away, right? And then you repaint it back, and the fire is gone. Small things. They're not, and that's kind of the problem, but also kind of a strength of the game is that it never goes crazy. Okay, it's exactly what it needs to be for a like fine platforming game. Again, like it's tight. The controls are tight. I love just bouncing around, hearing Mickey's kind of gasps and stuff. Like it's a lot of fun, and jumping from point A to point B, and using again kind of this lower level simplistic type paint mechanic to paint something away or paint something forward, whatever it might be. It's rock solid. I think it, again, doubles down what I was mentioning a few minutes ago, just with that repetition. What you need to do in each level, okay? Not just in the structure. Well, actually, yes. the structure of the level, and what does that influence? It influences the paint part, right? So all the stuff I mentioned a few minutes ago, okay, well, you go into a level, you know exactly what that paintbrush is going to do, right? There's going to be a couple hidden walls, and you're going to want to erase that to find like artwork or, you know, kind of behind the scenes stuff, which is cool. Again, there's a lot of stuff to collect, and, you know, breaking things and all that stuff, using it against enemies. I think that probably could have been enhanced. I love the idea of like melting them away, you know, some of like the robotic pirate type things, and thinning them so they are just kind of like the skeleton of them, and that's when you can hit them. Really cool. And I think that is where they kind of pushed it the most, where it's like, okay, how can we use paint and really infuse it in the gameplay, really make it something special? And I think they did, you know, here and there. Again, bosses, I would say bosses, and that choice of like, how do you want to actually handle it? I think that's a good one as well. I just feel like there could have been a little bit more, because I just feel it was very fundamental. Okay, you're going to use this to start this gear, and that's going to do this platform. You jump on the platform, and then you can erase this one section, jump to the next section, fill it back in, you know, whatever. It's very by the books. And again, there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing really wrong with the entire game. It is a fun game. It's one of those games, you know, I covered Spyro on this channel. I did Spyro 1 and 2. I'm sure I'll do Spyro 3 probably this year. There's some games out there that are just, you put them on, you collect things, you kind of go like, again, by the book, you know, task 1, task 2, task 3, you follow the order, and you kind of just, you take it in a little bit. Like, I'm definitely taking in the visuals and some of the cool story moments, or again, some of that meta commentary, but you're kind of also disconnected. You can listen to a podcast, you can listen to music, you don't have to be too connected. It's something that's almost very easy and calming. And I will say, as the days went, because I played this over a stretch of like multiple days, there is like a calmness to it where, you know, you turn it on and you say, okay, I'm just going to kind of relax. And I got lost a couple times. It's like, where am I supposed to, or what am I supposed to find, you know, in any given level? Eventually, when I go into a level, you know, I kind of rapid fire the dialogue prompts, and I'm just going out there searching for stuff. So I'll collect everything, and that's like, okay, who do I actually talk to? What do I actually have to find? And actually, as the game has gone on, I've realized that by doing that, I have completed tasks without even knowing it, right? One time I lit like 6 lanterns on my own, found the quest that I needed to do, and it was to light 8 lanterns. I was like, oh, I only got 2 more because I already did the whole thing. You know, I already did the whole map. So, you know, those kind of, and again, I think that's calm. That's something that kind of is cool to just have in the background. I mean, you're connected to it as much as you need to be, but not too much. But I don't know. I think there was more that could have been done. It's a weird game because it's not all that long, right? 7-10 hours, you know, depending on what you're doing. It's a game that actually could have been cut shorter, I think, because that repetition does kind of hurt it as you go. So it's like, you got to cut it shorter, but then like certain things actually needed to have been enhanced, right? I think you could have used the paint in cooler and more dynamic ways, whether it's just for platforming or whether it's for fighting enemies or both. If you enhanced it, you would actually maybe add on to the length, which is something I think needed to have been cut. So you're kind of in a tough spot of like, which one do you do? Do you enhance it and actually make it longer, or do you pull it back? And because I think either one actually kind of would have worked. If you enhance some of the cooler features in the game, you might make it just more interesting at the same length. Or if you keep it exactly how it is, it's cool enough, you know, it's fine enough, but then it drags too long, right? It becomes too repetitive. So if you shorten up how many levels there are, keep everything else the same, you might actually, you might reach that like happy balance either way. But I do respect this game. I have no major like issues. I'm not out here like hunting for Epic Mickey. It's a fun game. It's a game that I wanted. It's a game that I finally got. You know, again, I think getting it on discount was the right move for me to do. I like that these kind of games get it. You know, I mean, like the Silent Hills, the Resident Evils, you know, the Dead Spaces of the world, try not to do just all horror. I mean, we've gotten a lot of remakes, and you normally go for like these really pristine, right? Like these elite gaming icon type things. And that's fine. Like, I think we need those. I think we need to keep some games around. But I think like doing Destroy All Humans, you know, which THQ has become really good at, doing these kind of things, right? Destroy All Humans, Epic Mickey, you know, kind of that second tier, that B tier. You're going off of games that are not perfect, right? They're rough around the edges, but they nail a couple things, and they're still important. They're still big parts of gaming history and things that people should be able to experience nowadays. And, you know, for it to be locked on the Wii like it was, and in a not great playable state, a lot of these games suffered from those motion controls and the camera work and all that jazz. You know, so those kind of games do deserve remakes almost as much, maybe even more than the elite titles. It's just that, you know, like we said, when you do these remakes, you're going off of imperfection, right? You're remaking something that is not perfect, and therefore the remake is not going to be perfect. Therefore, I think it should just be judged on the game itself. Now, I kind of did more of a critique on the franchise or the game in and of itself, but I think as a remake, it did exactly, I mean, it's perfect. Actually, as a remake, it did exactly what it needed to do, right? There's not much more you could hope for because it's going off of just this base game that is flawed. But again, I think that kind of makes it special a little bit. So let me know what you guys think in the comments. Make sure, as always, you're subscribed to the channel, bell icon turned on, and I hope to see you all on the next one.